It is the 1st of April, and as you just saw with that opening, it's the DA Congress getting underway today. It's 2 days. Everything seems to be running on time. Expectation is program proper for the DA getting underway 9 o'clock this morning. We'll continue our build-up, and once it starts, rolling coverage of that. And let's stay, of course, with the big story of the weekend, the DA Congress. Steenhuisen and Mpho Phalatse going to be battling it out in Midrand this weekend. But there is, of course, more to the DA Federal Congress than just who takes the reins, who's in charge after these 2 days. They're going to be outlining key policy decisions ahead of next year's election. So what is expected from political analyst Professor Duvenhage? He's made time for us this morning. Morning to you, Prof. I appreciate your time out of Potchefstroom this morning. We'll talk policy in a moment and next year's elections and coalitions and all that. But do you have an expectation who will walk away with this, John Steenhuisen or Dr. Mpho Phalatse?
Good morning, Gareth. Yes, I think it's about 80 to 90% sure that John Steenhuisen will make it. I think we are going to see more or less a status quo when it comes to the federal leadership, when it comes to the chairperson, and definitely when it comes to the chairperson of the Federal Council. When it comes to the deputy, there may be a bit competition here and there, but there I'm also expecting the incumbents to do relatively fine. So I think we are looking at the 80 to a 90% status quo outcome when it comes to leadership. When it comes to policies, I think we are going to see a lot of emphasis on the success of the DA in terms of provinces as well as local structures where they govern. I think coalition politics will be at the core. I think the whole philosophy of less state versus more state will be central. A more free market approach with a developmental orientation, these type of things, I think, will be very central in their policy approaches.
And Prof, as we just kick the tin down the road a bit to next year, because obviously that's the all-important, all-encompassing focus is for next year. No doubt going to be a big talking point at the Congress this weekend. The policies that you're talking about that the DA is going to unpack, they're going to put to their members later today, that's going to become part of their 2024 national election campaign. Do their policies work on a national basis? There is an expectation that there could be a growth politically for the DA next year. Do their policies work nationally, or do they only work down in the Western Cape, do you think?
Gareth, I think there is experience showing that it can work on a national basis. They had successes not only in the Western Cape, but they had successes in local structures throughout the country. They are making great strides when it comes to coalition politics, but then we must expect the reality that coalition politics is a completely different ball game, and a lot is dependent on what happened to the ANC as a party. At the moment, we have seen some surveys indicating a support base anything from about 50% down to as low as 37%. And I am not sure that the ANC has already clarified their internal struggles. So what happened there will be very important. I'm also picking up strong rumors that the ANC and the IFP may work closer together in the future, not necessarily the EFF. So this ball game is going to be critical for the DA and the way they position themselves in this regard.
It's going to be very tricky, especially for the electorate, those of us who will have to go out and vote next year, Prof, as well, because it is quite confusing. You take a look at Ekurhuleni, you take a look at Tshwane, the coalition, even though you do say the DA are making inroads, it's messy for the South African public to follow. We're not too sure who we're going to be voting for next year, because we don't know who those political parties are going to get into bed with. Which way do you see the DA going if they were needing a big coalition partner? ANC, is that in the offing, do you think?
Well, I honestly think that the DA won't easily go for the ANC, although I believe that cooperation between the DA and the moderate elements in the ANC may be very important for a stable middle ground. But I am seeing the DA working together with smaller parties, parties like Action South Africa, parties like the Freedom Front Plus. They will definitely try working closer with a party like the IFP. I'm not seeing them in any way working together with the EFF. And yes, in some way, we may see on a national and in some provincial environments the type of scenarios we have recently seen in the metros. I am reading this as a growth process in terms of coalition politics. And this is going to be a very huge challenge to keep these coalitions together. A few days back at the meeting in Mpombela, I had a conversation with Helen Ziller about her experiences in terms of coalition politics. She told me that it was a relative easy game to make the original coalition in the city of Cape Town, but to be the head of a 10-party coalition under current circumstances, with the ANC sometimes playing a controversial and even destructive role, can be extremely, extremely challenging. But that is the name of the game. I think in a way, if I look macro-politically, this is going to be an election that is going to put our democracy at test, and coalition politics will be at the center.
And at the centre of those coalition politics is going to be all the various policies from within each political party, which is going to be their selling points, obviously, next year, Prof, as well. And I see one of the big ones, and I imagine there'll be a lot of debate on this, not just at this Congress, but in the build-up to the elections, the DA Economics Justice Policy, suggesting a scrapping of BEE. How well do you think that will go down with some of the other political parties, namely two of them, the ANC and the EFF?
Gareth, we have seen a tendency in South African politics, not coming since the 2021 election, but long before that, and that is the one of identity politics. And we cannot ignore the reality of identity politics. But on the other side, we cannot ignore the discriminatory nature of a policy like broad-based black economic empowerment, to mention only one. And there are other discriminatory policies as well. If we look at the Constitution clearly stated non-racialism, non-sexism, and away from the policies that is to the advantage of a certain grouping, especially on a racial base, given the history of apartheid. I know there were a black caucus, a very strong one within the DA, Mmusi Maimane and others was part of that. But the fact of the matter is that I think on pure ideological points of departure, they cannot continue with a B policy. I think for the DA, it is important to create an identity away from the whole B approach. And we know what is the outcomes of B. We know that B, in a way, come out of the whole philosophy of cadre deployment, that you can relate to the whole idea of the National Democratic Revolution and what is going with that. And the DA would like to distance themselves, but they may experience reaction from black groupings within their own environment in terms of the B policy.
I've no doubt it's going to be one of those policies that they're going to be talking about at this Congress when it gets underway later this morning. Prof, always a pleasure speaking to you. I thank you for your time so early on a Saturday morning as well. From Potchefstroom for us, political analyst, Professor Andre Duvenhage, joining us this morning. So to remind you, as the party begins to put forward its plans and its new leadership, whoever that may be, at this Congress, it's all in the build-up to next year's 2024 national elections. That coverage, by the way, has already begun with us at Gallagher Estate at the Congress, but the program proper, if you've only just tuned in, the DA Congress getting underway 9 o'clock. And what we're hearing from Siphamandla Goge at the event is that it's all running according to time at the moment. So 9 o'clock, you can expect it to get underway.